Welcome to Better Conversations with me, Sehaam Cyrene, giving you the words and the confidence for better conversations in leadership. That's what I do in each episode. I explore strategies and I love sharing questions and phrases for you to play around with and make your own. This recording happens live at Better Conversations on YouTube, so you might like to chat with me there and drop me a conversation challenge. Hello, Sehaam here. I want to talk about how you can regain control in conversations. Very often we can feel disempowered after a conversation. We kind of walk away thinking, well, that's not how I wanted that to go. And that can paralyze us. That can make us feel irrelevant, not really having the autonomy we thought we had. Really can send our day into a negative slide. And our interactions from there are impacted. Also, the relationships with the individuals that we were in conversation with. So I want to talk to you and share with you a couple of scenarios that are quite relevant. I hear them come up a lot for leaders. Doesn't matter how experienced, how new a leader you are, or what your position is in an organization or what function. These things affect all of us. So I want to talk through those two scenarios and give you at least 8 ways that you could think about taking control back in the conversation, because that's the thing that happens. Someone says something, it's not what we're expecting, so we end up feeling a little bit paralyzed, not knowing how to respond. We don't want to be rude and counter back. We don't want to create a situation where maybe we don't trust ourselves, or we don't trust the situation, and we don't feel safe. These techniques that I'm going to share with you hopefully will put you back in control, give you a sense of autonomy and feeling empowered, and that you do have choice and you can do something about it. The 2 scenarios that I'm going to cover are a conversation with a colleague, and that might be one-to-one or in a meeting, and a conversation with our boss. And again, that might be a one-to-one or in a meeting. These things still hold true that I'm going to share with you. In exploring that, we're going to start with the colleague first. And I want us to explore really what might be going on for that individual, because if we can understand what might be their position and why they've responded in the way that they have, we can have a little bit more empathy. We can engage our brains in a more productive way and avoid an amygdala hijack where we feel threatened or annoyed or irritated. And we can actually respond in a more regulated, controlled way. And that's part of this whole thing. It keeps us calm. When we feel like we can do something about our situation, that's very soothing. So it's really important that we can find mechanisms that get us to that place as quickly as possible. With colleagues, what can happen is that you mention a topic that you've brought to the table, say in a team meeting, and that you want to explore. But a certain individual hijacks the conversation, gets very excited, talks about all their experience and aspects about it. When I've talked to people about this tendency to sort of jump in and get, add to and contribute, and they don't realize just how much airtime they've taken. And they confess that they've let their passion run away with them. So you may have brought up a topic that they actually feel really passionate about. And that is really important, actually, because they're a potential ally. That piece of information, knowing who round the table might be passionate about this, is really useful to you in engaging them and maybe getting them to support you in the conversation in some ways. And when they do that, when they jump in and take over the conversation, it's because they want to share, typically. And so they want a role in this. That's kind of what they're saying is, I want to be included in this. Knowing that and knowing how to harness that energy for the greater good is really useful. On the other side of the scale is that they feel insecure or territorial. When we feel like someone may be stepping on a space that we feel is important to us, or maybe we tried to do something in that space before, or it's something that we started, something that we feel an emotional attachment to. That individual may show up as being quite territorial, may intentionally hijack the conversation or try and derail it in some way. That's not helpful. That's quite a negative energy. But again, it's an indicator of wanting to be engaged at some level. The space that we should worry about is when people have nothing to say or nothing to contribute. But if they're feeling insecure or territorial, and that comes off as kind of trying to take over the conversation or speak over you, it's actually a useful sign that they'd like to be involved potentially in some way. And that's down to us to find out how. Okay, and they may sit somewhere across all of that space, right? And it may be a mixture. We're complicated human beings. We're complex, so those feelings may be, surfacing at both levels, and that makes it hard for us to read what may be going on. We may be getting confused signals as a result. Why people do that is generally because of a lack of awareness of how they derail conversations, how they show up in a conversation in a way that's not helpful to others. And certainly, that's something that we think we do really well as leaders. We think we create these safe spaces and for people to talk, but then there are moments when we actually do take over, and that's really just because we haven't read the room necessarily. We're not in touch with what individuals want to contribute or how they would like to contribute. So that's certainly in the case of someone who's feeling excited and passionate. Also for someone who's territorial. The thing about someone being territorial or insecure is that how they then show up and speak in the meeting actually breaks trust. So other people do notice that. The read that they take from that is, I'm not sure I can trust you in a similar situation because of the way that you took over that conversation. Bear those in mind as we go through the things that you can do. So here are 4 things that you can do or experiment with in this situation. When we feel emotionally triggered or charged, our voices can rise, our intonation can rise. And when we try and jump back into the conversation and bring it back towards us, that may show up in our voice. And people read that as a nervous energy, as an uncertainty, as maybe you not having confidence in yourself or doubting yourself. So watch your tone of voice, your energy and your pitch. And I would suggest you slow down. You might be reacting and responding to the nervous energy that they've exhibited. But I'd encourage you to rein that back in, slow it down, and try and lower your voice. That will command the space. People will find it easier to listen to you, and it shows confidence in your ability to be in that conversation. Okay, the second thing that we want to do is to thank them for their contribution, regardless of whether they, unintentionally hijacked it or intentionally try to take over. We want to acknowledge their contribution. To that point that I made earlier about wanting to be involved at some level, this is a nice way to acknowledge them, and it upholds trust because it shows and demonstrates, and you're modeling a way of bringing them in, because if we don't, there's a risk that they continue to try and derail the conversation as you try and bring it back to topic in the time that you have. Okay, the third thing that I want to share with you here is you've acknowledged them, thanked them for their inputs, but this is an opportunity to restate your point in your lower voice and recontract on the process and the outcomes that's needed in this conversation. So to be able to say, thank you, those points are really interesting and I think they're really relevant. The time that we have here, I'd like to spend that in getting everyone's perspectives on this. Then this is what I'm going to do. So then sharing what the next steps are going to be, how you're going to use that information. And fourthly, related to this is clarifying your expectations. Too often I hear when I'm sitting with leaders and we're dissecting what happened in a conversation, we realize that actually they didn't make clear what their expectation was of people in that meeting, whether it's one person or many. They didn't actually state, I want to get your responses to. And the importance of this is if people don't know what's expected of them or how you're asking them to speak into a topic, then you'll either get silence or derailment. And so being clear about people's part in this, and also clarifying, what role they play in the decision-making process, if there is one. Think about those 4 things as ways that you can actually regain control for yourself and then continue the conversation. And if you've done your prep beforehand, before a conversation where you're wanting to get opinions or perspectives for a certain piece of work, then hopefully these will help you plan that and also anticipate how people might respond in those situations. So I'd love to know if you've tried any of these things and what success you've had, or what you might do similar, or a situation that you might have had recently where you took back control of a conversation. All right, the second scenario is with our boss. Let's just dive into what might happen with our boss. Our boss may need to have some control, or a lot of control. And this explains that feeling that maybe we're being micromanaged, because they are being measured on the success of certain outcomes. We don't always translate that very well. Sometimes we don't explain it at all to our people. It's just something that we sit with as a leader, and we forget to take people along that journey with us and explain why something is important, what the parameters are, what the tolerations for something being done differently or not having an agreed outcome. And that can show up as being controlling. The other thing that can happen a lot is that we transmit. Leaders can be on transmit mode. Basically, what that relates to is, here's a task I've charged you to do. I need you to go ahead and do it, and this is how it needs to be done. Go and speak to so-and-so. Don't do it that way. Do it this way. And in their mind, very often, efficiency is a value. They value that enormously. So they're trying to shortcut ways to get you to do the work, or for the work to get done. And so there's an over-reliance on being efficient. If I tell you what to do, that's the quickest way that this thing is going to get done. And they miss that really important ingredient, which is emotional commitment, ownership. The other thing that leaders do, and as a direct report this can carry enormous weight, is leaders can state opinion as fact. This is the decision that was made. It has to be this way. So-and-so wants X. Sometimes when we dig a little deeper, we can discover that actually that's an opinion. It's not a fact. It's an assumption about from a previous conversation. It's a conclusion that they've reached. But as we know, in cultures of silence and cultures generally, information gets thinned as it goes up the chain. So less and less information goes up the chain. Decisions can get made at a certain level without full view of the facts, the realities, the challenges, the validity of concerns of certain stakeholders and so on. It's very easy as a direct report to feel the weight of our boss saying this is how it is. And for leaders, I urge you to really take note of that. The very fact that you are their boss is going to carry enormous weight, which is why we have a responsibility to step carefully into this space and not squash people's passion and ownership and desire to be involved and belong and contribute. And this is a really common way that leaders can squash that in people. And then we ask, why is accountability so difficult? Why don't they own this piece of work? You might want to check out the previous video that I did on the Who energy model, which was all about that, how we unintentionally take that away, and why it's so important to maintain conversations where we ensure that the individual, our direct report, has ownership. And that speaks into our boss just not being aware of those dynamics, those power dynamics, and the impact on our ownership of the task. Okay, so what can you do about that? How can you regain control of a conversation? And the scenario might be that you've got a status update, you checked in with your boss, and you shared plans for a decision made, steps that were going to be taken, how something was going to be done, and so on. But your boss declares that your position is inaccurate in some way. What can we do about that? We feel deflated, we feel disempowered, we feel a bit bamboozled, we don't really know how to respond in the moment. That's all natural, normal, and okay. There are still things you can do. If you can, in the moment, clarify what and how the task needs to be executed. So what's the outcome we need? Because asking that question might actually surface some parameters that are important in your boss's mind, but they haven't necessarily conveyed to you previously. So continue that, keep diving in into that space to really understand, what does this thing look like? What are the variables here? What's the toleration for me doing it differently? A really important question there. When you have gathered some more evidence and information about what's true, where the walls of your room are, so to speak, then we can think about recontracting and trading. But absolutely okay if you come out of that meeting and go, hang on, that was not how I wanted it to go. I expected a different outcome. I'm not sure why we went into that topic. I really wanted to focus on something over here. You can reach out to your boss and say, can we just have a quick catch up? Because I want to check a couple of things. I'm not sure that I've got a full understanding of the situation, or I'm not sure. I think I may have missed, or there may be some pieces of information I'm missing here on reflection. Always know that you can do that. Reach out to them and have another conversation about it. And in that conversation, I would encourage you absolutely prepare for that conversation, revisit your original thinking, stress test yourself. Maybe there was a point that they had in there, but maybe there are particular points of difference that you have. And then use that conversation as an opportunity to recontract or trade. So you might actually need to surface some risks or consequences that your boss is not aware of. Okay, so if we do this, then what's the impact on this other related thing? And are we okay if the risk is that we lose support for X project or that budget is reduced? Whatever that is, it's really important that we have those conversations. Again, think about those walls. I need to understand, how firm these walls are. How high are they? Are they hollow? Is there room for movement? Do they move? Where can I adjust or trade or, have an outcome that maybe works better for me, so that I can keep owning this. I still feel passionate about it and I can execute it in a way that makes it my own. And then I'm happy to be accountable for that, but I can't be accountable for things where I am restricted or I'm being strictly directed as to how I need to do it, because there's no involvement of me. I can't see the connection or how that aligns with my personal values or what I feel is important. Have the conversation about the consequences. Okay, so if we do this, are we happy that X takes a back seat? What else needs to come to it? What other risks am I not aware of that you know of that would be helpful for me to understand and know how to be in that conversation that I need to go and have with so-and-so. So that is super important. Do that. And then also take the opportunity at the end to advocate for your work style. Hey, it's really helpful for me if I have visibility of before we go into a meeting like that. I like to prepare so that I know how best to use other people's time. So it would be helpful to me if you have information that is pertinent to what I'm working on, if I could have that ahead of time. Would that be possible? And what is it that I can do for you that means you are in the know? How would you like me to keep you updated? What would you like to know about? So it's advocating for yourself, but also showing that you are interested in how they operate best and what they need as well, so that this relationship, this partnership, this working together can be optimal. Okay, those are my 8 tips. Do check out my other videos related to this that you might find helpful. The one on vulnerability without boundaries. So how much do you share, and managing your conversations from that perspective, also from a perspective of risk, so that you don't put yourself in a uncomfortable position. And also check out the video on questions, how to use questions to help people think deeply, to see what other questions you might be able to use in these conversations, because it's really important that in that recontracting and trading or negotiating for a different outcome, that part of that is we help people think more deeply about that situation, surface things that they may not have appreciated, and take it from there. Let me know what you found particularly helpful about what I've shared today. I'd love to know. Until next time, I hope you have better conversations. Fantastic. Thanks for joining me. I will see you next week.